The Memphis sun, usually a comforting blanket, felt like a spotlight fixed on Elvis Presley. He stood by the grand piano in the music room at Graceland, his fingers idly tracing the polished wood. The house, usually a symphony of laughter and music, felt strangely quiet that afternoon, amplifying the clamor inside his head. It was 1969. The comeback special had happened. Vegas was booming. Records were flying off the shelves. He was at the top, with something heavy pressed down on him. He sighed, a sound that seemed to echo in the high-ceiling room. Footsteps padded softly behind him. Trouble? Elvis turned. It was Arthur, a man who wasn't just a friend, but a kind of quiet anchor in his storm-tossed world. Arthur was older, maybe 60, with kind eyes that had seen a lot of life, and a gentle smile that could calm. A raging river. He'd been a session musician back in the day, a blues man, and now he mostly just hung around, offering quiet wisdom and a steady presence. He'd seen Elvis rise from a raw kid to the king, and he treated him like both. Arthur, Elvis mumbled, running a hand through his perfectly coiffed hair, a gesture that was more about agitation than style. I don't know. Arthur leaned against the doorframe, not pushing, just waiting. He knew Elvis well enough to know when to talk and when to listen. The room hummed with the silent question. It's just all of it, Elvis finally burst out, gesturing vaguely around the opulent room, then towards the world outside, the world waiting for him. The records, the shows, the screaming crowds, the money, the cars, the Graceland, all of it. He looked Arthur square in the eye, a raw vulnerability in his famous gaze. Why me, Arthur? Why me? Question hung in the air, thick with unspoken anxieties. It wasn't about gratitude. Elvis was grateful, fiercely so. It was about the weight, the sheer unbelievable scale of his life. Why him and not millions of others who dreamed just as big? Why him and not his friends, who were just as talented in their own ways? He felt like he'd won the lottery a million times over, but the prize came with an invisible, crushing burden. Arthur didn't answer. Right away, he walked over to the piano, picked up a discarded sheet of music, a new song Elvis had been working on, and hummed a few bars. Then he turned to Elvis, his eyes thoughtful. You really want to know, Arthur asked, his voice soft but firm. Not just why me for the fame and fortune, but why me for the whole damn thing? The good, the bad, the beautiful, the ugly? Elvis nodded, desperate. Yeah, Arthur, I do. I truly do. Arthur smiled, a knowing, almost mischievous glint in his eye. It's a humbling answer, son. Not what most folks would expect. He paused, looking out the window towards the gates where fans often gathered even when Elvis wasn't visible. And it's not something I can just tell you. You gotta see it for yourself. Elvis frowned. See what? What do you mean? I mean, we're gonna take a little trip, Arthur said, pushing himself off the doorframe. Not on a plane, not in a car. A different kind of trip. A journey into the heart of things. Elvis looked confused. Arthur chuckled. Everywhere and nowhere. You ready? Elvis, despite his confusion, felt a flicker of intrigue. The weariness that had settled over him for weeks seemed to lift a fraction. Maybe Arthur had a point. Maybe there was something he was missing. He was tired of the endless cycle of fame, the demands, the isolation that came with being Elvis Presley. He needed a fresh perspective. A reason that resonated deeper than album sales or concert tickets. Ready as I'll ever be, Elvis said, a hint of his old spark returning. He just hoped this trip wasn't some kind of elaborate riddle or a spiritual retreat. He needed answers, not more questions. But with Arthur, things were rarely straightforward, and often that was exactly what Elvis needed. Arthur just grinned, a profound understanding in his eyes. Good, now close your eyes, and don't open them until I tell you. Elvis hesitated for a moment, then complied. He took a deep breath, the scent of polished wood and old paper filling his senses. He heard Arthur move closer, felt a gentle hand on his shoulder. Then, a strange sensation like the world around him was melting away, replaced by a quiet hum. It wasn't scary, not exactly, but it was profoundly unsettling. He felt lighter, as if the very air had become less dense. He wanted to open his eyes, but Arthur's voice, calm and steady, held him. Just breathe, E, and listen, really listen. And then, silence. A silence deeper than any he had ever known. A silence that seemed to hum with possibilities. He wondered what on earth Arthur was planning. He knew one thing, though. This was going to be an experience unlike any other. And perhaps, just perhaps, it would finally give him the answer to his burning question. Why me? The profound silence that had enveloped Elvis slowly began to dissipate. He heard a new sound, faint at first, then growing clearer, the gentle strumming of a worn guitar. It wasn't the roar of an arena or the polished sound of a studio recording. This was raw, honest, and filled with a quiet passion. He felt a different kind of light on his eyelids, not the filtered sunlight of Graceland, but something warmer, more direct. K.E. Arthur's voice, still calm, broke through the soundscape. You can open your eyes now. Elvis blinked them open slowly, adjusting to the unexpected surroundings. He wasn't in the music room anymore. He was standing on a dirt road, red dust clinging to his expensive boots. The air was thick with the scent of honeysuckle and distant wood smoke. Before him stood a small two-room shack, its paint peeling, its porch sagging slightly. A rusted tin roof glinted in the strong, bright sunlight. His breath caught in his throat. It was the shotgun house. He looked around. The world was different here. Simpler. A young boy, no older than 10, was sitting on the porch steps, strumming an old beat-up guitar. His hair was messy, his clothes patched, but his face was absolutely alight with concentration. He was humming a blues tune, his foot tapping a hesitant rhythm. Elvis felt a jolt. It was him. A younger him. This is where it began, E, Arthur said, his voice a quiet murmur beside him. Before the lights, before the crowds, before the king, just a boy and a song. Elvis watched his younger self, captivated. He remembered that guitar saved for and gifted by his parents. He remembered the feeling of those strings under his fingers, the absolute thrill of making music, even if it was just for himself. There was no pressure here. No expectations, just pure, unadulterated joy in the sound. I remember that feeling, Elvis whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Like the music was just bursting out of me. Like I had to sing, had to play. Arthur nodded. You did. It wasn't about fame then, was it? Not about money or applause. It was just about the music. About a boy finding his voice in a world that didn't have much else to give him. They watched as young Elvis struggled with a chord, his brow furrowed in concentration. Then he got it, and a wide, unself-conscious grin spread across his face. He hummed louder, swaying slightly. Completely lost in the moment, Elvis felt a pang of nostalgia, but also something else. A flicker of shame. He had forgotten that pure joy. Pressures of his adult life had sometimes made music feel like a job, a performance rather than a spiritual necessity. We didn't have much, Elvis said, looking at the worn-out house. But we had each other, and we had music. Church on Sundays, the radio late at night. And that voice, Arthur added softly, that voice, that was already a gift, waiting to be unleashed. But even then, it wasn't just yours. E. It was a conduit. Elvis frowned. Not quite. For the feelings of everyone around you. For the stories of the bluesmen you listened to. The hymns your mama sang, you were soaking it all in, and it was shaping you. They walked around the side of the house, where a young Gladys Presley was hanging, laundry on a line, humming softly. Her face, though tired, held a quiet strength and an unmistakable love. Elvis's throat tightened. He missed her so much. She always believed in me. Elvis murmured, his voice cracking. Even when there was nothing to believe in but a kid with a guitar. And what did she believe in? Arthur prompted gently. Not just Elvis the star, right? She believed in the goodness in you, the spirit, the way you made people feel even then. He recalled little moments, singing for neighbors, getting praise for his voice in church, those early moments of connection, of bringing a smile or a tear to someone's face. Felt so simple, so genuine. They were about shared humanity, not about status. The scene began to waver, the edges blurring. The scent of honeysuckle faded. The sound of the young boy's guitar became more distant. This is where the why me began, Arthur said, his voice now sounding like it was coming from far away. Not because you were destined for fame, but because you were given a gift. And what you did with that gift, how you shared it, that was the true beginning of your journey. It was never just for you. The colors faded, replaced by swirling grays and blues. Elvis felt a deep sense of calm, mixed with a renewed understanding. He hadn't just become Elvis Presley. He had grown into him, shaped by humble beginnings and a raw, undeniable passion for music. The vision had brought him back to his core, to the pure, unburdened love for sound that had started everything. It was a humbling reminder that the essence of his music was not in the millions of records sold, but in the heart of a boy on a Tupelo porch, simply strumming a song. Closed his eyes again, feeling the weight of the vision, the profound simplicity of his past. Question, why me? Still lingered. But now it felt different. Less like a burden, more like a seed planted in fertile ground, ready to grow into a deeper understanding. He was ready for the next part of Arthur's trip. When Elvis opened his eyes again, the world around him was in motion, a kaleidoscopic blur of faces and places. He wasn't in Tupelo anymore, nor was he back at Graceland. He was standing on a bustling street corner, but it wasn't Beale Street or Sunset Strip. This place felt ordinary. A bus rumbled past, exhaust fumes hanging in the air. People hurried by, their faces etched with the everyday concerns of life, work, family bills. "Where are we, Arthur?" Elvis asked, his voice hushed, feeling like an invisible observer. "Everywhere and nowhere specific," Arthur replied, his voice calm amidst the urban hum. "This is just life, the kind of life most folks live, the kind of life you came from." Elvis watched a woman push a stroller. Her shoulders slumped, her expression tired. A man in a worn suit clutched a briefcase, eyes scanning the headlines of a newspaper. A group of teenagers laughed loudly as they walked past, their energy a stark contrast to the adults around them. Then he heard it, faintly at first, coming from an open window of a diner. His own voice. "Can't help falling in love." He turned, straining to hear. It wasn't a booming sound. It was just background music, almost lost in the din of the city, but something caught his attention. A tired woman with a stroller paused just for a second. Her gaze drifted upwards, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching her lips. For that brief moment, the weariness seemed to lift from her shoulders. Arthur gestured towards her. "See that? A moment of peace? A reminder of something beautiful? Maybe a memory with someone she loves, or just a simple escape from the grind." Elvis watched, fascinated. He had never seen his music through this lens. He was always on stage or in a studio or signing autographs. He never saw the quiet personal impact it had on millions of individual lives. The scene shifted subtly, like a dream bleeding into another. Now they were in a hospital waiting room. The air was heavy with unspoken fear and sterile disinfectant. A young man, pale and anxious, sat slumped in a chair, his head in his hands. A small radio on the counter played softly. "Hound Dog." Elvis winced. It was such a high-energy song, so vibrant. It felt out of place here. But then, the young man's foot began to tap, almost imperceptibly, to the rhythm. He lifted his head, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. His shoulders relaxed slightly. He still looked worried, but the music seemed to have provided a tiny, momentary crack in his wall of anxiety. Could be good, could be bad, but for a few minutes, he's not just waiting, he's remembering something else. A time when life felt simpler. Maybe a dance, a car ride with the windows down. Your music gives him that escape. A breath. Elvis felt a lump form in his throat. He had always thought of his music as entertainment, as a way to connect with a crowd to make them dance and scream. He hadn't considered it as a lifeline, a whisper of hope in moments of quiet desperation. The scene shifted again. This time they were in a dusty, sun-baked living room somewhere in the countryside. An elderly couple sat close together on a worn sofa, listening to a crackling radio. "Love Me Tender" was playing. The woman leaned her head on the man's shoulder, and he gently stroked her hand. Their eyes were closed, a peaceful serenity on their faces. "They'd been through a lot," Arthur explained. "Hard times, sure. But your song, it reminds them of their own tender moments. The enduring love, the quiet strength they found in each other. It gives voice to what they might not be able to express themselves." As music wasn't just his, it belonged to them, to every couple who had ever loved, every person who had found solace in a melody, every weary soul who needed a brief moment of escape. It wasn't about his fame, but about the feelings his songs evoked in others. "I never saw it like this," Elvis admitted, his voice barely a whisper. "I saw the big picture, the stadiums, the charts, but never these quiet moments." "That's the humbling part, E," Arthur said, his hand resting gently on Elvis's shoulder. "Your gift isn't just about what you do on stage. It's about what your music does for others. When no one's watching, it echoes in their lives, providing comfort, joy, memory." "Pull me." The scenes began to swirl once more, blending into one another. He saw snippets. A soldier listening to "Are You Lonesome Tonight?" on a scratchy record player in a faraway land. A young girl singing "Teddy Bear" to her doll. A group of factory workers humming along to Jailhouse Rock on their lunch break. Each face, each moment showed a profound personal connection to his music. It was humbling because it wasn't about his ego. It was about his contribution to the fabric of human experience. He was a vessel, as Arthur had said, for emotions that transcended language, status, or hardship. The "why me" began to transform into "why this music through me." Colors faded once more, leaving Elvis in a suspended state of profound reflection. He wasn't just Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll. He was a part of countless private moments, a silent companion in joy and sorrow. The echoes of his music were everywhere, touching lives in ways he had never imagined. And for the first time, he felt the true weight of that, not as a burden, but as an incredible privilege. The swirling images dissolved, and Elvis felt the familiar sensation, the subtle hum of a high-ceilinged room. He opened his eyes. He was standing on a stage, but it wasn't the concert hall. It was a brightly lit television studio. The live audience was buzzing, a mix of excitement and anticipation. This was the '68 comeback special, a moment of triumph, but Arthur was there beside him, his gaze focused not on the cheering crowd, but on Elvis himself. "This was a turning point, E," Arthur said, his voice softer than the studio noise. "You showed the world you were still you, still raw, still powerful. But look closer." Elvis watched his own performance projected onto an invisible screen. Only he and Arthur could see. The stage was massive, the band tight, the lights dazzling. He was in a white jumpsuit, embroidered and elaborate. The audience was a sea of faces, expectantly waiting for him to deliver. "Look at them, E," Arthur prompted. "They love you. They adore you. They paid good money to see you. They want to be in their troubles. They want magic." Elvis watched himself move, sing, command the stage. It was electrifying, undeniably powerful. But then Arthur pointed to something else. a flicker in Elvis's eyes as he bowed. A brief moment of exhaustion, a hidden weariness beneath the practiced smile. "Every night," Arthur explained, "you have to be Elvis, not just sing the songs, but be the king. That takes a toll, doesn't it? The expectation never stops. The perfection demanded." The constant glare of the spotlight. Elvis nodded slowly. The adrenaline rush, yes, but also the deep fatigue afterwards. Constant travel, the endless demands on his time, his energy, his very soul. He was a prisoner of his own fame, trapped by the legend he had created. The scene dissolved into a montage of snapshots. Elvis trying to walk through an airport, mobbed by fans, security struggling to hold him back, the desperation in some of the fans' eyes, the feeling of being pulled in 1,000 directions. Elvis at home, trying to have a private moment, but the phone ringing off, the hook, always. Someone needing something to be made. A deal to sign. Elvis trying to enjoy a simple meal, but paparazzi cameras flashing through the restaurant window, turning a normal moment into a spectacle. Elvis signing autographs until his hand cramped, seeing the unquenchable thirst for a piece of him. A physical connection to the legend. "The why me isn't just about receiving," Arthur said, his voice resonating through the scenes. "It's also about giving. Giving so much of yourself that sometimes there's little left. Your private life became public domain. Your quiet moments became rare treasures. Every move, every word." Everys felt a wave of empathy for his past self. He remembered the loneliness, the isolation that came with being so famous, so adored, yet so completely separated from normal life. He couldn't just walk down the street, go to a movie, or have a quiet conversation without being Elvis Presley. "But you chose this, didn't you?" Elvis said, the question sounding almost accusatory, directed at his own past self. "You chose the music," Arthur corrected gently. The fame was a consequence, a massive, overwhelming consequence. But with that consequence came a profound responsibility. The burden isn't just the loss of privacy. It's the burden of influence. He looked at a billboard advertising one of Elvis's movies, his larger-than-life face staring down. Then to a group of young boys emulating his dance moves. To a young woman finding courage to pursue her dreams because Elvis's music had inspired her to be bold. "People look to you," Arthur continued, "that they also put their hopes on you, their dreams, their anxieties. You become more than just a singer. You become an idea. And that idea, it requires constant feeding, constant vigilance, constant sacrifice." Elvis felt the truth of Arthur's words deep in his bones. The question, "Why me?" now held a new dimension. It wasn't just about why he was chosen for the good things, but why he was chosen for all of it. The incredible highs and the crushing lows, the constant demands and the endless scrutiny. It was a package deal, a destiny that came with immense power and equally immense pressure. The scenes faded into a soft glow. Elvis closed his eyes, feeling the weight of the crown, but understanding it in a new light. It wasn't just a burden, it was a responsibility. Testament to the immense impact he had on the world, for better or worse, by simply existing as Elvis. The humbling aspect here was realizing the true cost of his gift and acknowledging the profound commitment required to bear it. He understood that the "why me" was not a question of his worthiness, but a realization of the magnitude of the task placed upon him. As the last lingering images of the crowded stages and demanding spotlights faded, Elvis found himself in a completely new setting. It was a small, dusty town somewhere in the American heartland. The air smelled of freshly cut grass and distant rain. He was standing near a local diner, the kind with checkered floors and a jukebox in the corner. "Look around, Arthur urged softly. "This is where the magic truly happens. Not on the big screens, but in the quiet, everyday moments." Elvis saw a young couple sitting at a booth, their hands clasped over a milkshake. A nervous energy hummed between them. The girl kept glancing down at her hands, and the boy shifted uncomfortably. They looked like they were on a first date or perhaps on the verge of a big decision. Then a familiar melody began to play from the jukebox. All shook up. As the upbeat rhythm filled the diner, something shifted in the couple. The boy suddenly grinned a genuine, unburdened smile. He started to tap his foot under the table. The girl, initially shy, looked up, a slight smile playing on her lips. Then, almost spontaneously, he reached across the table and took her hand. This time her grip was firmer, more confident. Their conversation seemed to flow easier, lighter. That song, Arthur explained, it cut through their nerves. It reminded them to just be young, to feel the joy of the moment. It was a tiny spark, but sometimes a spark is all you need. He had written that song, sung it, performed it countless times, but he had never imagined it acting as a silent matchmaker, easing a moment of tension between two strangers in a small-town diner. The scene shimmered and shifted. Now they were in a cramped, cluttered garage. Teenager, maybe 16, was hunched over a workbench trying to fix an old radio. He looked frustrated, grease smudged on his cheek. He let out a sigh, throwing a wrench down. Then he reached for a small, portable record player on a nearby shelf. He carefully placed a 45 RPM record on it. Heartbreak Hotel filled the garage, raw and soulful. As the music played, the teenager leaned back, closing his eyes. The tension in his shoulders seemed to ease. He hummed along, then picked up the wrench again, his movements more deliberate, more focused. He spent another few minutes fiddling with the radio. Then, with a small click, a light flickered on. The radio crackled to life. Your music gave him a moment to clear his head, Arthur observed. A little respite from his frustration, enough to approach the problem from a new angle. Think of how many small victories like that happen every day, fueled by a melody. Elvis thought about his own struggles in the studio, the times he felt stuck or tired. Music had always been his escape, his solace. He was seeing now that it was the same for countless others. The scenes continued to unfold. A tapestry of interconnected moments. A group of young musicians practicing in a dimly lit basement, trying to emulate Elvis's guitar riffs, dreaming of their own stages. His music was inspiring a new generation. A shy girl, encouraged by the confidence of his songs, finding the courage to ask someone to dance at a school social. A father and daughter driving down a highway, singing burning love at the top of their lungs. A quiet moment in a senior living home. An old man tapping his foot to a familiar tune, his eyes distant but peaceful, recalling his youth. It's not just about the individual listening, Arthur explained, his voice taking on a thoughtful tone. It's about the connections that happen because of the music. A song reminds someone of a loved one, sparking a phone call. A shared lyric becomes an inside joke between friends. A melody inspires someone to pick up an instrument, starting their own journey. It's a ripple effect, Arthur concluded as the scenes began to gently fade. Every note you sing, every beat you lay down, sends ripples out into the world. You're not just creating sound, you're creating connections, memories, inspiration. You're part of something far, far bigger than yourself, a chain reaction of shared human experience. Elvis was silent, of shared human experience. The why me had begun with a sense of isolation and overwhelming burden. Now he saw himself as a vital link in an endless chain of human connection and joy. He was no longer just an individual bearing the weight of fame, but a conduit, a catalyst for countless beautiful unseen moments in the lives of others. The humbling truth was blossoming. His life, his gift, was never meant to be a solitary experience. It was meant to be shared, to be given freely, to resonate in the hearts of millions, sparking their own unique journeys and connections. He was not just the singer, he was the thread that wove through countless individual tapestries. And the beauty of that realization, the profound sense of purpose it instilled, was more powerful than any applause. The vibrant tapestry of connected lives dissolved, and Elvis found himself standing in a quiet, almost desolate landscape. The air was still, the light muted, It felt like a space between worlds, a void where possibilities hovered, unexplored. "This is a difficult one, E," Arthur said, his voice unusually somber. "To look at what could have been, or rather what wouldn't have been." Before them, a series of muted, almost monochromatic scenes began to play out. First, a small garage in Memphis, much like the one Elvis remembered working in before Sun Records. A younger, slightly heavier Elvis, dressed in mechanic's overalls, was wiping grease from his hands. His face was tired, etched with the quiet resignation of someone doing a demanding job day in and day out. He looked competent, but there was no spark, no joy in his eyes. "No Sun Records," Arthur explained. "No Scotty, no Bill. Just a good honest living, a steady paycheck, a quiet life." Elvis watched this alternate version of himself. He saw him go home to a modest house, eat a simple dinner, read the paper. There was a wife, a couple of kids, a peaceful, unremarkable existence. No fame, no fortune, no screaming fans. But also, no music resonating across continents, no groundbreaking performances, no cultural revolution sparked by his voice. He saw the family happy enough, but without the vibrancy, the almost electric energy that Elvis the performer brought to everything. There was a palpable sense of something missing, a quiet echo of unfulfilled potential. The scene shifted. Now a different path. Elvis as a truck driver, just like his first job. He was driving a long haul, the monotonous drone of the engine filling the cab. He looked out at the endless road, his expression blank. He would stop at roadside diners, eat alone, sleep in motels, a life of solitude and routine. No leap of faith into a recording studio, Arthur said. No moment of pure spontaneity when you sang, "That's all right, Mama, just the road." Elvis felt a chill. He remembered how much he'd hated the loneliness of those long drives, how he'd dreamed of something more, something that would fill him with purpose. This alternate life felt hollow. The scenes continued, showing variations of a life unlived as Elvis the King. He saw himself as a factory worker, as a local shop clerk. In each scenario, he was a good, decent man, working hard, providing for his family. But in none of them was there the explosive joy, the profound connection, the electrifying impact that is actual life. Look at the ripple effect, or rather, the lack of it, Arthur pointed out. In these lives, there are no screaming fans finding their voice, no lonely people finding comfort in a song, no young musicians inspired to pick up a guitar, no cultural boundaries broken down by a unique blend of sound. Elvis saw the absence. The hospital patient in Chapter 3 who wouldn't have found a moment of peace, the young couple who wouldn't have broken through their awkwardness, the struggling artist who wouldn't have found inspiration, the millions who would have lived without Hound Dog, without Love Me Tender, without Jailhouse Rock. The world in these alternate realities felt flatter, less vibrant. It wasn't about missing him as a person, but missing the music he brought, the energy, the cultural shift. This isn't about saying your life is better than theirs. Arthur clarified, sensing Elvis's internal struggle. Every life has its value, its dignity. But your question was, because if it wasn't you, with your voice, your spirit, your unique blend of influences, the world would have been deprived of something truly special, something that touched millions in ways no one else could. Elvis felt a profound weight, but it wasn't a burden this time. It was the weight of irreplaceable purpose. He saw that his path wasn't just about personal ambition. It was about filling a unique void in the cultural landscape. His gift wasn't just a talent. It was a necessity. The muted scenes began to fade, replaced by a gentle, returning light. Elvis felt a deep sense of humility. He wasn't chosen because he was better than others. He was chosen because he was different. Because his particular combination of voice, charisma, and soul was uniquely suited to spark a revolution. The why me was no longer a question of personal worth, but a recognition of a cosmic assignment. He was a piece of a grand puzzle, and without his piece, the picture would have been incomplete. It was a humbling realization that his extraordinary life wasn't just for him, but for everyone who found something vital in his music. As the last echoes of the alternate realities faded, Elvis found himself in a completely different kind of space. It was dark, a void punctuated by pinpricks of light like distant stars. But these weren't stars. As Arthur spoke, the lights resolved into tiny, glowing moments, each one a testament to an act of kindness, comfort, or inspiration, all subtly linked to Elvis's music. "You've seen how your music brings joy, connection, and even a moment of peace," Arthur said, his voice resonating through the void. "There's another layer, the unseen gifts, the generosity, the empathy, the pure goodness that your music inspires. A single mother looking exhausted was trying to soothe her crying baby. She looked utterly spent. The radio was on low, playing Love Me Tender. The baby whimpered. The mother sighed, then slowly, almost instinctively, began to hum along. As she sang, her voice soft and shaky, she held the baby closer. The baby's cries softened, then ceased. The mother's shoulders relaxed. She's tired, struggling, feeling overwhelmed, Arthur narrated. But your song, a simple lullaby, in that moment allowed her to connect with her deepest well of love. It gave her the strength, the peace to nurture. It wasn't just a song, it was a catalyst for her own. Etain Shireen, to know his music could help another mother in such a profound, quiet way was truly humbling. Another light brightened. This time, a young boy, maybe 7 or 8, was carefully drawing a picture. He was listening to Jailhouse Rock on a small record player. He wasn't drawing anything related to the song, just a bright, colorful landscape. He looked utterly engrossed, lost in his creative world. He's an imaginative child, but he's often distracted, easily frustrated, Arthur explained. But your music, the rhythm, the energy, it helps him focus. It provides a joyful backdrop for his creativity to blossom. He's not thinking about the lyrics, he's thinking about the freedom the music inspires, the joy of creation. Elvis smiled. He remembered getting lost in his own imagination as a child, using music as a springboard. To think his music was doing that for someone else, quietly encouraging their unique spirit, was a revelation. The lights continued to expand, showing different scenes. A volunteer at a soup kitchen listening to In the Ghetto. On his break, his face thoughtful. He then got up with renewed purpose, feeling a deeper connection to the struggles of those he served. The song had deepened his empathy. A group of strangers gathered around a street performer playing Suspicious Minds on an acoustic guitar. They started tapping their feet, then singing along, then sharing smiles and nods. For a few minutes, barriers fell, and they were simply people sharing a joyful moment of human connection. A young man struggling with depression, listening to Bridge Over Troubled Water. He wasn't cured, but the song offered a glimmer of hope, a feeling of not being entirely alone. It was a bridge of comfort in his darkest hour. These are the unseen gifts, Arthur reiterated. The moments when your music nudges people towards their better selves. It helps them access their compassion, their joy, their resilience. It makes them feel understood, or less alone, or simply inspires the magnitude. It wasn't just about his talent, but about the spirit, the intention behind the music. It wasn't about being famous. It was about being a catalyst for good in the world. In ways he never directly witnessed, he was a source of light even in the darkest corners of people's lives, simply by being himself, by giving his gift. The void began to shimmer, the lights receding. Elvis felt a profound shift within him. The initial question, "Why me?" had been born of confusion, doubt, and perhaps a touch of the lonely burden of fame. But now it was transforming into an understanding of profound responsibility. intertwined with an even more profound sense of purpose. The humbling answer was slowly but surely revealing itself. It wasn't about being chosen for personal glory, but about being chosen as a conduit for a unique form of healing, joy, and connection. He was a vessel for something beautiful that the world needed, and his life, with all its extraordinary highs and lows, was the instrument through which that beauty could manifest. He was a gift, given to give. The starry void faded, and Elvis found himself standing on a vast open plain, bathed in a soft, ethereal light. The air was calm, almost reverent. It felt like a space for deep thought, for reflection on the lessons learned. Arthur stood beside him, his gaze sweeping across the limitless horizon. "You've seen the beginning, the impact, the burden, and the unseen gifts," he said, his voice carrying a new gravitas. "Now, we need to talk about what it all means, the responsibility." Elvis nodded slowly. He felt different. The "why me?" that had plagued him was no longer a lament of confusion, but a profound, almost sacred inquiry. "When you are given a gift as immense as yours, Arthur began, it doesn't just come with fame and fortune. It comes with a platform, a voice that echoes across continents, reaches into homes, touches hearts." He gestured, and faint translucent images began to form around them like projections on thin air. Elvis saw news headlines about his charity work, clips of him speaking out for causes he believed in, flashes of him visiting children's hospitals. He saw photos of soldiers overseas, inspired by his own military service, finding comfort in his words. "You have the power to unite," Arthur continued, "to bring people together regardless of their backgrounds, their beliefs. When they're in your audience, they're not just separate individuals. They're a community, bound by the shared experience of your music." Elvis remembered those moments, the electric current that ran through a crowd when he was truly in sync with them. He had always felt it, but now he understood the deeper significance. It wasn't just entertainment, it was a communal bonding experience, a momentary escape from division. "You have the power to inspire," Arthur went on, "to show people that dreams are possible, that a boy from Tupelo can reach the stars, to encourage resilience, creativity, and the courage to be oneself." He saw the faces of young artists, aspiring musicians, drawing strength from his story. He saw fans finding courage in his lyrics to pursue their own passions. "And you have the power to uplift," Arthur said, his voice soft but firm, "to offer solace to the lonely, joy to the weary, hope to the downtrodden. Your voice, your presence can be a beacon in someone's dark night." Elvis thought of the hospital patient, the struggling mother, the individual moments of solace his music provided. He had given those gifts unknowingly before, but now he understood the profound, active responsibility of it. "This isn't about being perfect, Arthur clarified, sensing the weight settling on Elvis. "Nobody is. You'll make mistakes. You'll have your struggles just like any human, but the responsibility is to acknowledge the immense trust that has been placed in you, to use that platform, that voice, that influence, not just for personal gain, but for something larger." He looked at Elvis, his eyes filled with a deep, unwavering understanding. The "why me" isn't about some divine favoritism. It's about a unique alignment of talent, charisma, circumstance, and a deep-seated need in the world at that moment. You were the right person with the right voice, at the right time to bring a particular kind of light into the world. Elvis felt a profound shift within him. Question, "Why me?" had finally shed its last vestiges of doubt and bewilderment. It had transformed into a realization of a life's true calling, a sacred duty. His talent wasn't just a possession. It was a stewardship. His fame wasn't just a status. It was a tool for connection and upliftment. The vast plain around them began to glow with a golden light. Elvis felt an immense wave of gratitude wash over him, mixed with a renewed sense of purpose. He wasn't just the king. He was a servant to a higher cause, the cause of joy, hope, and human connection through music. This is the humbling answer. Arthur said, his voice now filled with quiet triumph. It's not about being better than anyone else. It's about recognizing that your life, in all its extraordinary highs and challenging lows, was given to you for a purpose far greater than personal glory. It's about giving back, endlessly, through the gift you were given. Mace closed his eyes. But to serve, not to be simply adored, but to be a vessel for the universal language of music, bringing light to countless lives. The why me was a call to profound, selfless responsibility. The golden light intensified and gently receded, leaving Elvis and Arthur standing in a space that felt boundless, yet utterly intimate. The air thrummed with a quiet energy, a sense of profound truth finally settling. "You came to me with a question, Arthur said, his voice echoing softly. Why me? You wondered why you were chosen for this extraordinary life, this overwhelming fame, this incredible fortune." Elvis nodded, his heart full, no longer with confusion, but with a deep, resonant understanding that had been slowly building through their journey. "You saw your humble beginnings," Arthur continued, "and remembered the pure, unburdened joy of music. That was the seed. A raw, unique gift, waiting to blossom." He paused, letting the image of young Elvis on the Tupelo porch hang in the air. "Then you saw the echoes of your music in the quiet lives of millions," Arthur went on. "A moment of peace for a tired mother, a spark of hope for an anxious man, a shared memory for an old couple. Your music wasn't just entertainment. It was comfort, escape, connection. It transcended your stage favede life." Elvis remembered the individual faces, the quiet moments of solace, the profound impact he had never truly seen. "You experienced the burden of the crown," Arthur said, his voice acknowledging the pain, the immense pressure, the loss of privacy, the constant scrutiny. "You realized that being the king was a heavy mantle, a life lived constantly in the spotlight, demanding immense sacrifice." Elvis felt the ghost of that weight, but now it was accompanied by a sense of profound responsibility, not just personal burden. "And you saw the ripple effect," Arthur concluded. "How your song sparked connections, inspired dreams, provided soundtracks to cherished memories. How one note, one rhythm could set off a chain reaction of human interaction." Arthur looked at Elvis, his eyes twinkling with warmth and deep wisdom. "And finally you glimpsed what wouldn't have been the void that would have existed without your unique voice, your spirit, your blend of influences. The world would have been missing something essential, something only you could bring." "So," Arthur said, stepping closer, "the humbling answer to why me isn't about being better than anyone else. It's not about being chosen for personal glory or for an easy life. In fact, your life has been anything but easy." "No, Arthur, it hasn't." "The humbling answer, Arthur stated, his voice clear and resonant, "is that you were given this extraordinary life because you were the vessel for something greater than yourself. You were entrusted with a gift, that voice, that charisma, that connection to the very soul of music that the world desperately needed. You were given this life not to be the king, but to serve as the king of a new sound, a new feeling, to break barriers, to bring joy, to connect people, to inspire, to comfort. Your purpose was to spread light, to bridge divides, to offer a universal language of emotion. When the world was craving it, it was a profound act of giving, a responsibility to share your light with millions, even when that light felt heavy." Elvis felt tears welling in his eyes. It was true. It made so much sense. The endless striving, the pressures, the loneliness. It was all part of the journey of being that vessel. His "why me" was no longer a question of self-doubt, but a realization of his profound and undeniable purpose. He was chosen to be a conduit of joy, a beacon of hope, and a bridge between hearts. "It was never just for you, E," Arthur concluded, his voice fading slightly as the space around them began to shimmer. "It was for everyone you touched. And that, son, is the most humbling truth of all." The words echoed in Elvis's mind a powerful symphony of understanding. He wasn't just Elvis Presley, the kid from Tupelo who got lucky. He was a force, a phenomenon, a gift, entrusted with a vital role in the tapestry of human existence. He was chosen to give, to uplift, to resonate, and in that realization he found not just peace, but a deep abiding gratitude. The shimmering light faded, and Elvis felt the familiar weight of his own body, the texture of the polished wood beneath his fingers. He opened his eyes. He was back in the music room at Graceland, standing by the grand piano. The afternoon sun still streamed through the windows, but now it felt different, warmer, less like a spotlight and more like a gentle blessing. Arthur stood beside him just as before, a soft smile on his face. "Well, E, did you find your answer?" Elvis took a deep breath, a breath that felt lighter, fuller than any he had taken in years. He looked at Arthur, his eyes shining with a profound clarity. "Yes, Arthur, I did." The weight of the question, "Why me?" had been lifted, replaced not by emptiness, but by a powerful sense of purpose. He understood now. It wasn't about being better or luckier or more deserving than anyone else. It was about being uniquely equipped, called to a profound responsibility. "It's humbling," Elvis said, the word resonating with a new meaning. "To realize it was never just about me, was it? It was about the music. And what the music could do, what it could be for other people." Arthur nodded, his smile widening. "Exactly. E, it's a gift you were given, to be given. And with a gift of that magnitude comes a sacred trust." Elvis walked slowly around the music room, his gaze resting on the gold records lining the walls, the instruments, the photographs. Before, they had felt like trophies, symbols of his isolated fame. Now they felt like markers of a journey, testaments to the millions of lives he had touched, the unseen ripples he had created. He thought of the tired mother, the anxious young man, the loving elderly couple. He thought of the young musicians inspired to pick up a guitar, the strangers who found connection through his songs. He remembered the burden, the loneliness, the endless demands, and he understood that those too were part of the calling. The cost of being the vessel. I always thought it was just luck or maybe just raw talent," Elvis confessed, his voice tinged with honest reflection. "And then the pressure just built, and I lost sight of why I even started, why any of it happened." "Many do, E," Arthur said gently. "When the spotlight is so bright, it's hard to see anything else, but the light you were given wasn't meant to blind you. It was meant to illuminate the way for others." Elvis sat down at the piano, his fingers brushing the keys. He didn't play a melody, just let his hand rest there, feeling the smooth ivory. "So what do I do with this, Arthur? This understanding?" "You live it," Arthur replied simply. "You live with gratitude. You sing with purpose. You remember the unseen gifts. You embrace the responsibility. You find joy in the giving because that's what you were truly meant to do." Elvis looked out the window, past the gates of Graceland, towards the world beyond. He knew the demands wouldn't disappear. The pressures would still be there. But now he had a new lens through which to view them. Every performance wasn't just a job. It was an opportunity to connect, to uplift, to share. Every song wasn't just a hit. It was a heartbeat from millions. He stood up, a quiet resolve in his eyes. The weariness that had clouded his spirit for so long had lifted, replaced by a renewed energy. A sense of profound peace. "Thank you, Arthur," Elvis said, his voice deep with sincerity. "Thank you for showing me." Arthur just smiled, his eyes twinkling. You always had the answer in you, E. You just needed to see it from a different perspective. Elvis walked towards the door, his stride more confident, his shoulders straighter. King had not only found his purpose, but he had found his humility. He was Elvis Presley, yes, the icon, the legend. But he was also a man who understood his unique place in the universe, a vessel for a powerful, beautiful gift meant to be shared. He was ready to step back into the world not just as a performer, but as a man who understood the profound, humbling reason why he was chosen. The answer to "why me?" was not a simple word, but a complex, beautiful tapestry of connection, responsibility, and selfless giving. And armed with that truth, Elvis knew he could face anything. He would sing, not just because he could, but because he was meant to. And the music now, more than ever, would truly be for everyone.